much is on there?
It's going midship.
How much line do you have on that one? Mental note, what distance, visibility? You're sealed.
We're on Lake Michigan, 6 miles from the shore. Where directly beneath us is a piece of American history.
Go, go.
How was it, sir?
Still a pretty bird.
But is time running out to preserve it for all to see? To understand how America's carrier pilots helped win World War II, look no further than Lake Michigan. Far inland and free from enemy submarines, the Navy considered the lake ideal for training.
They had 2 makeshift carriers where they were getting their carrier qualifications, that is, landing and taking off. You can imagine with 2 carriers out there and the planes would land at Glenview, take off from Glenview, the buzz of air traffic over the North Shore. According to the Navy, almost 15,000 carrier pilots qualified on 2 makeshift aircraft carriers on the lake between 1942 and 1945. Many would fight in the Pacific War's biggest battles. They defeated the Japanese Navy, and they were critical in the taking of the islands, which were stepping stones to Japan. But not every practice landing on Lake Michigan's carriers was a success. 128 planes crashed or fell into the water. They missed a deck, or they went off the deck. Despite all the aircraft that went into the drink, only 8 pilots were lost. The majority of the pilots were rescued immediately. The aircraft remained on Lake Michigan's bottom.
You see the training number on the side? She's in great shape.
Until decades later, when the Navy allowed dozens to be recovered, restored, and displayed at museums across the country. Some of the earlier planes that were pulled up, their markings were remarkably intact. The air and the tires were intact. The planes weren't rusted through. The group A&T Recovery located many of the planes by sonar and pulled out the first plane in 1987, and their most recent recovery happened in 2012. But the future of the estimated 70 aircraft that remain in the lake is in question. Quagga mussels, invasive to the lake, are destroying what's left of the airframes. In Waukegan Harbor, we meet Terrace Lyssenko and the crew of A&T Recovery. They're on a race against time to save a few more planes.
We're keeping track of how much damage the environment is doing to these aircraft. At some point, they'll crumble. They will just crumble.
However, the crew needs the Navy's permission to recover planes, and in recent years, that's not something it's granted easily.
They do everything they can to obstruct our recoveries. They've got it to the point where we have to raise all the money, we have to have an archaeologist.
The Naval History and Heritage Command says it's considering options regarding the lake's planes and says future recoveries should focus on planes tied to a historic person or event. They also say some planes should be left in the lake for future generations to discover.
So the engine lines up with the fuselage.
Yet, if there is one plane that can be a difference maker, Lyssenko and his crew knows where it is.
We haven't been there for a few years. We're going to take you out there.
We're off. We're ready.
We're on our way to a Dauntless dive bomber. Terrace and his crew have known about this particular plane going back to the 90s, and he says there is interest now in raising it.
SBD Dauntless dive bombers helped defeat the Japanese at the Battle of Midway. And if you ever visit Chicago's Midway Airport, you'll see a Dauntless hanging in the terminal. And yes, it too was recovered from the lake by Terrace and his crew.
These are types of historical elements that should be preserved. More and more money should public funds or private funds should be donated for that type of thing.
Back on the lake, we arrive at the coordinates after an hour-and-a-half boat ride.
We know where we are with it.
Terrace has the ship's pilot circle around a marker buoy.
Where's the buoy, you guys? The aircraft's right there.
And they spot the Dauntless on sonar. The team's divers descend through clear water and reach the bomber 90 feet down.
They come across the engine first and swim to the fuselage where the pilot and gunner would sit.
This plane beneath us it's special because it fought in Operation Torch, which was pretty close to the beginning of the U.S. involvement in World War II.
In 1943, a pilot attempting to land this Dauntless on the USS Wolverine crashed into Lake Michigan. He survived and served on the USS Yorktown before becoming a doctor after the war. While time and marine life have not been kind to this Dauntless, Lyssenko says it can still be used as a teaching tool.
Because what we think it should be used as a display as it is on the bottom, and then educate about marine environments and biological damage being done by extinct species, learn about metallurgy, a whole bunch of stuff that the youth of America needs to learn.
The crew says its next step is convincing the Navy this secret of Lake Michigan is worth recovering.
I wonder where all the people that care about what the men and women of the greatest generation did. Don't they want that history protected and saved?